Hello, and welcome to Awaken the Saint Within podcast. In this podcast, we inspire you to live a life of holiness and greatness. This podcast is being brought to you by Awaken the Saint Within Ministry in collaboration with Pierced Heart Productions. And I am your host, John Kinuthia. And now, let's get rolling in Awakening the Saint Within you. Hello, and welcome back. This is our second episode with my friend, Tom Fertal, Mr. Tom Fertal. And now, as we continue with our conversation about seeking God's will and being aware, I want to talk about something that is really impactful. And I've experienced this, my friends have experienced this. When to know that you are lined up with God's will. When you become aware that surely I am doing God's will. How does that look like? And as you embark on your goals for 2022, how can you listen to that? And how can you be aware that you are exactly lined up with God's will? So my friend, you have been around the block many times.
What are you saying, I'm old, John?
When it comes to God's will and learning and understanding and being aware of God's love and God's will, I'm pretty sure, you've been there. So share with us, in your experience, when we are not following God's will, how is that feeling? How is that experience? And then we're going to come back and talk about now how following God's will allow us to embrace and feel at ease.
You know what, John? Thinking about that question, I think I want to share a little personal perspective on that.
Right.
I think about my career, and I think about I spent many years at one particular high school, very, very fulfilled, and I saw another opportunity. And it was a chance to move to a different role. And I went to this school, and it's one of those things I think our listeners probably experience where I kind of thought, well, maybe this is where God wants me. It felt right. It looked good. It was a promotion. It was more money. It was so there was those elements to it as well as a professional, as a career person, If I look back now, which of course is always the difficult part, it's easier to look back and recognize where you blew it than when you're right in it.
Right.
But there were plenty of signs along the way, I think, that it really wasn't the right move in the strictest sense. Because not only did I not experience, I guess there was some professional success, but I really never felt that, I was totally in line with God's will. I felt that I was kind of forcing the issue. I felt that, I think, the idea of the position was more attractive than the reality of it. And that's a very difficult thing to kind of sort out in our own minds. It felt good and it looked good, but was I at peace? Did I find myself looking forward each and every day to going to do what I was doing? And I look back to it, I realized in hindsight as well that there was a lot of, it was me, the things I'm going to do. That was probably the number one thing, and as I look back now, how many times I thought, well, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that. Right. And I fast forward to, now my current, position down at St. Mark's High School, where we have unbelievable, phenomenal things happening in terms of the school and the resurgence of the school. And I go back to going, well, there's my first key in knowing that I'm aligned with God's will. Right. Because if I'm not aligned with God's will, these things don't happen. Right. The results do matter. As I said in our one session, I do talk about every day being faithful and humble, but that faithfulness part, and I try to, as a leader, instill that in the team as well. That, look, people, my key team, if we're doing God's will, if we're staying faithful, then there's no end to what can happen here. Right. If we're doing our own thing, I don't care what we do, we'll never be successful. Right. So I think that's a good starting point for the conversation, which is looking at, starting with yourself. Can you honestly look in the mirror? Like so many things in our moral life and our spiritual life, when I look in the mirror, can I honestly say that I feel I'm doing God's work? Right. Or am I doing something that I think I can do or want to do, and then trying to say, no, God wants me here. So it starts with us. It starts with that, like everything else. It starts with that looking in the mirror, that reflection, that examination of conscience. Yes. do I believe I am carrying out God's work, God's will, in what I'm doing each and every day? Right. And if there's hesitation or serious doubt, then you've got to reflect on that.
Yeah, that's a very insightful way to begin this conversation, because you mentioned something, feeling it like it is the right thing, feeling like this is what God wants me versus the reality. Do you think sometimes we misinterpret or miss God's promptings?
By the way we think this is all about me. And
I think we miss them, but I wonder sometimes. Look, we would all love for God's will to be so clear that, I say, God, give me a 2x4. Just smack me in the head and go, like Moses, or do this. That's what we want, but it doesn't happen that way. Right. However, I think the more we're open to God's will, it does become clearer. I think we muddle it up because we're not honest and open with ourselves. Yeah. And just an analogy. I was thinking about this when you had posed a question. I think about when I used to teach morality, for example. Yes. And we'd get into some. Of course, you had moral issues that were very straightforward doctrinally, and then others that were kind of a gray area. Right. And it made me think about. We used to talk about tattoos. Now, what does that have to do with any of this? Well, it was funny because kids would talk about, Mr. Fertal, what about tattoos? And this is high school juniors, and students would think automatically, well, I know you're probably going to say that they're wrong, but this person says that they're right. Right. And I would say, look, let's not talk about the tattoo itself. We can get into that debate about, how much can I alter my body and those types of things. But I said, if you're thinking about a tattoo, the most important thing as someone who's teaching morality is, again, for you to look in the mirror and answer the question, why do I want to do this, right? Now, that's the hard question. Mm-hmm. Can you answer that? I said, if you truly believe, because people say, well, I'm just doing it for me. And I go, really? How many people get a tattoo just for themselves? The first thing they do is go, hey, look, I got a tattoo,
Right.
But the bottom line, I would say, is if you're doing something because you think that tattoo will make you cooler, sexier, tougher, or whatever,
right.
then you have something to deal with in your own life. Right. Why do you feel the need to do that to try to project something different, okay? So we never got, we didn't have to answer the question about the objective right or wrongness of a tattoo. What's in your heart? What is motivating you to do this? So I think when it comes to, so take that analogy to what we're talking about, whatever you're doing, why are you doing it? Okay?
Why are you doing it?
There's nothing wrong with wanting to be successful. Right. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be successful financially or professionally or have a career path. Those are all fine. But why am I doing what I'm doing? Right. And that's a question not for you with your friends or not with other people. That's you and God.
Right.
And that's the hardest part. And I think most areas of our personal life, our prayer life, our spiritual life, we fall down if we're not honest.
Yeah. I have to concur with you in the sentiment and the feeling that sometimes when you're doing something for our own, in a hindsight, there is always that voice saying, this is not
No, I don't want to hear you. I don't want to hear that part. I don't want to hear that part. Get away. Right.
Because I have a similar experience where I had an opportunity where I thought was perfect fit. I love doing ministry. I love teaching. I love coaching. I love educating. And I got an opportunity that I thought in my sense, there's all these awesome things I could do. The opportunity was I was working in the evenings and at night and at weekends. So it was already taken away from my family, which is a big primary thing that I should look at and say, if anything is taking me away from my young family, my 3 children at that time, then probably it's not. And in my head, there was that ring every single time I would go to work. Like, what, this is a bad idea.
Right.
You're leaving your family behind. I did not listen for quite a long time. And I actually even had an accident one day going to work because I had all these mixed emotions that were telling me, I don't think this is God's call. I don't think this is God's will for you. But I did it anyway. You may be like that. You may be going through something like that today in your life as you set yourself in 2022. Maybe you have an opportunity that has come up and you are wondering, is this really God's will? Now, if it is really God's will, how do we feel internally? I'm sure the feelings are different maybe feelings of peace, maybe feelings of experiencing the love, maybe support. So for you, Mr. Tom, how is that experience like when you know it's really in line?
I'll give you I guess maybe a radical example. Maybe not a radical example based on the lives of some of the saints, but a radical example in our time. I look back at the first time I really felt I should move from parish youth ministry to Catholic education.
Right.
Going to my first school assignment. Now this was year 1999, and in Catholic schools, a lot of times you're starting out that the pay is not phenomenal. I had at that point, I think I had maybe 3 children on my way to 6, and my wife was going to stay home, but I really felt, heart, mind, body, and soul, that I was called to work at this particular high school. And I remember sitting there and I'm looking over, we had Quicken on the computer and we're looking over the budget and looking at the finances, and I'm going, I don't know if this will really work out. And my wife said, but do you feel that this is where you're supposed to be? And I said, without question.
Right.
And we did it, okay? And never looked back. And we didn't starve. We didn't get kicked out of the house. Again, trust in God and things happened. Yeah. He provided and made things work. But that to me, that was an example where, it sounds almost like a circular argument. When you know. When you know, it was so overwhelming. But I think you said the key word, John. It was peace.
Right.
I had peace of mind. I looked at it and said, though it's going to be a change for our life, when it comes to some finances, I did not worry about that because I was in a good place of trusting God, and I knew this is where God wanted me. And so I think the key word was peace. It doesn't mean we're always going to have peace, always, but when you have that inner peace, knowing that I'm in line with what God wants, and I trust, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
So if you're full of turmoil, if you're always second guessing, having that little nagging doubt, that's also God's prompting. It's not just God prompting to say, you should be doing this. He also prompts us to say, yeah, what you're doing right now, that's not going to work out. So being quiet, being open, and listening.
Yeah, listening to God's will. Well, this is our Weekend the Sent Within podcast. And I can tell you, it's a joy to always speak to my friend Tom here, because he always gives us and reminds us to stay open, listen to God's call. Now, let's address someone who is struggling right now, whether it's a career or family, and trying to make some changes in their lives. And especially financially, knowing that, they're perhaps having a family, they are about to retire, and they don't know how they're going to make it. There's opportunities. In that moment of struggle, should they take action to follow God's will, or should they stay stuck in whatever position they are?
Well, it's a loaded question, but look, our whole spiritual life, I think if we're doing Christianity correct, we spend a lot of time being uncomfortable.
Oh,
I mean, I think we forget that.
I like that.
I think we think of the other way around, which is, everything should be, it should be comfort and just. No, we're not put on this earth to be comfortable. We're put on this earth to be radical. We're put on this earth to be disciples. Lord knows in this day and age to be countercultural. Right. So I think sometimes that comfort can get in the way. Now, again, it gets tricky because we're not talking about security. As a father of 6 children in 6 different schools, for me to go, hey, I'm going to give up, making a living, and I'm going to start, a business from scratch with no money and no income. No, you can be irresponsible. That's a
different story.
Right. We're not talking about, I can suddenly go be, like I said, go live in the woods with no money. Well, no, I've got obligations to meet. But you can't let again, our American society and where we are living the way we do, which even though we can complain sometimes about I want a nicer car, I want a bigger house, we still live nicer than 95% of people on the planet, which I remind my kids on a regular basis as they roll their eyes at me. But we don't want to let comfort or ease spiritually, physically, get in the way of pursuing what God wants. Because again, if we're open to that, and in the end, it's going to be better than where we are right now. And that is the hardest thing, all right? Because we're in a zone, we're at a comfort point, and the thought of changing that, it makes us nervous. I get that.
Yeah, and I think it's back to the point that you brought in as we began the conversation, trusting. Trusting that you're going to let this go Let go and let God be the center of your life.
There's a great little meme out there where I think it's a little girl and she has this little teddy bear. And she's holding on to this teddy bear for dear life. And I forget if the person before actually, it looks like Jesus or it looks like a family member with a handout, like say, give me that teddy bear. And then behind their back, they have this big, massive teddy bear, And like that sums it up so much. We're going, no, but I have this. I don't want to give this up. And there's God going, but I've got this for you.
Yeah.
That's the spiritual dilemma that we have when it comes to, letting go. Because we like to hold on to what we have.
Yeah. Wow, my friend, I don't know about you, but I'm already feeling it inside me here. This is Awaken the Saint Within podcast, where we bring you inspiration to inspire you to live a great life, a holy life, as God has called you to do and to be. When we come back, we're going to continue with this conversation, to summarize it, and also to give you great pointers on how you can proceed to make 2022 the best year yet, listening to God's call for holiness and greatness. I'm your host, John Kinuthia, and my friend here is Mr. Tom Fertal.